Welcome to this edition of the Capital Brief. I'm Seth Berenzweig. We're here in our BL Media studio in lovely downtown Tysons Corner, Virginia, here with our friend and colleague, John Tamny. John, how are you doing?
I'm great. Good to be back. Beautiful day.
Beautiful day. Beautiful day indeed. Beautiful forecast for the weekend. A lot of football coming. Pumpkin beer is out. Life is good. So we got to get you more into pumpkin beer. I'm sensing that. But that's another topic for
Way
another
above
day.
my head.
That's okay. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that, as I've mentioned before, I've really been looking forward to talking about, and that is the where are we with regard to the world of cryptocurrency, and where is Washington headed in terms of the regulation, if any, on cryptocurrency. Just to provide a little bit of a catch-up, as of the date that we are here in studio, we are beyond what had appeared to be what I would call a crypto summer swoon. The major cryptos had taken a bit of a dive downward. And as we sit here today, as of the date that we are taping, not only are the coins going back up, but from what I can see this afternoon, the price of Bitcoin is back to about 65,000, and the price of Ethereum is back to about 4,100. So there's been a big swing, but if you pull up the one-year chart, I think you'll see overall it's been a steady and consistent and pretty dramatic rise. The advent of crypto is nothing less than a really big deal. We are literally watching the recreation of money. But John, as you know, when Washington, D.C. sees a good thing, they really can't resist talking about regulating it. Can you kind of set the table for us in terms of where are we in terms of Washington, D.C.'s stance and approach on cryptocurrency?
Well, you hit on the right thing. Of course, Washington wants a say in this because politicians want a good retirement just like you and I do. And the way that they can achieve it is by having the various prominent businesses and prospective prominent businesses pay their tribute here. That is
right.
Their path. If they can regulate it, it means they can lobby regulations about it once they're out and they can make a fortune. So
right.
What's happening is not a surprise. Notice how there wasn't a lot of interest in regulating Bitcoin when it was a few $100s a coin, but
right.
now this is just human nature at work. And so what's fascinating to me, what I suspect is that Washington of course wants a say in this, but no one even knows if the creator of Bitcoin is one person or several.
Right.
And I think it speaks to something we've talked about a lot on the Capital Brief, that capitalism and technology is much faster than politicians. So it'll be really interesting to see if they can get their fingers into this really very much at all.
Yeah, and you know, it's the theme that you've correctly noted is that the finance and financial-oriented technology moves at the speed and the pace of business, where Washington, barely grinds forward one stumble at a time, and we have seen such a revolution in decentralized finance, so-called DeFi, over even just the last year. You're seeing major companies that have come out and are really using technology in a very creative way. I'll keep the focus on it pretty limited, although it's so fascinating and goes broadly as we want. When we're talking about the ecosystem of cryptocurrency, we're not just talking here about the coins. We're not just talking about the currency that flows through the ecosystem, such as the Bitcoin and the Ethereum coin or Chainlink coin or anything else. We're also talking about the underlying structure through which the smart contracts for Ethereum, for example, flow. So you're talking about blockchain, you're talking about link chain, which is the technology that is the informational interface between the basic grid and the flow of external information to be able to input data for the execution of smart contracts. And the entrepreneurial innovation here throughout the United States and frankly abroad has been breathtaking. Crypto, from a decentralized finance, is all about freedom. And when we talk about how governments are responding to it, let's talk a little bit about China. China, as you know, has had a pretty fascinating response to Bitcoin / crypto. If you watch CNBC, you would think that just about the only coin in the crypto universe is either Bitcoin or Dogecoin, but you and I know that there's a hell of a lot more than that. What are your thoughts in terms of China's crackdown on crypto? They've essentially outlawed it, and they are really just trying to eradicate it while trying to digitize the yuan. What are your thoughts in terms of what is China doing, and why do you think China's doing it?
China is trying to maintain some relevance in an area that they can't. What they're doing to me is almost immaterial. You and I have discussed it before. If you go on the internet in China, just on the basic internet, sign in at a hotel, you can't get Google, you can't get Facebook. If you looked up Tiananmen Square, you could not get any information about that.
Not much, right?
But anyone who knows anything about computers in China, which is a lot of people, can get all the information they want on the internet in China about Tiananmen Square. They can get Facebook, they can get Google, they can do all these things. There are censors in China, we know this, but information gets out and is passed around well before the censors get to it. And so my sense is that we're looking at something similar here. People want to exchange, and in exchanging, money is just the medium. It's the agreement about value that enables exchange. People want stability of the unit. The perception, the belief is that someday crypto will be stable measures of value, that stable coin will actually mean something. And it won't mean something if it's tied to another currency. That's not necessarily stable coin. But once that happens, there's no way governments can stop this movement.
Well, you've raised a lot of really interesting areas there. And I will talk a little bit for a moment about stablecoin. Stablecoin is an element of much debate. And there's a lot of disagreement in Washington. Of course, when you get a bunch of bureaucrats in a room, they'll love to disagree and try to figure out how to regulate it. But first, they'll put a lot of hot air into the room and talk about doing things that they're not going to be doing at all for the foreseeable future. There have been a rise. There's been a rise in the last year of e-wallets that you can hold on your smartphone, such as Celsius. For example, Celsius is an app that runs on your phone that allows you to deposit dollars that are deposited with USDC, U.S. Denomination or USDC, U.S. denomination or decentralized coin. And that is the United States stablecoin that is footed to the U.S. dollar. A traditional money market account in old-style brick-and-mortar banks gives an interest rate of certainly below 0.05%. The Celsius interest rate on stablecoin-held reserves gives an annual yield of 8.9%. So what does Washington do when it discovers that there are technological advances that allows more economic freedom with more technological progress? What do? They go in and they start attacking these companies. They go after, for example, Coinbase, that was trying to create a new model to trigger increased returns, because if you want to keep up with inflation, which is pretty high right now, one could argue, the best way to go about that is to try to invest in some of these other depository instruments through e-wallet. But the bureaucrats in Washington are going after that. They're threatening. The SEC is getting it on the act. It doesn't take more than a day or so to go by and listen to Elizabeth Warren call it. I think she literally called it like a third or fourth rate currency. Do you see any role, any legitimate, productive, or helpful role of regulation where Washington can come in and provide any kind of a positive regulatory impact to somehow supposedly protect investors, protect the public, while still allowing this this new technology to come about and to be used by the American public?
Probably not. My concern about Washington, really more than anything right now, is that let's go back to the early days of the internet. What was the initial kickoff? Oh wow, this is a transformative company. It was Netscape.
Mm-hmm.
Well, have you heard from Netscape lately? And I get the feeling, and I've argued this, that for crypto really to take off, a lot of these coins, these original coins, have to collapse. I've made the argument, maybe I'm wrong, that Bitcoin is Netscape. It's this original one that people are focused on. And so we're going to have a lot of cryptos that come and go, and people lose money on some of them because they assume that money's a speculation. No. Money is just an agreement about value. Money shouldn't fluctuate like this. And so my guess is there's going to be some losses, and my concern about government regulation is that it'd be the internet again. Remember what happened after the initial internet bust. People were being fined millions. If memory serves, they were trying to put these investment bankers into jail because they were putting lipstick on pigs, all this nonsense.
Right.
But in fact, this was just a lot of experimentation. There was a new technology, and so crypto is a new technology. This is when we need, this is a new way of transacting. It's a new way of basically producers exchanging together with decentralized currencies. What I hope is that there's not a lot of oversight so that there can be a lot of failure and success on the way to something better.
So in other words, let the free markets rule and let that be the regulatory impact that allows the strong to survive and the weak to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Always.
Well, I think that the majority of so-called altcoins are probably going to fail, and you're going to be able to get a lot of sifting out. Unfortunately, in mainstream media, there really is a fundamental shortage of real, meaningful, broad-based information about this marketplace. And if you watch some of the traditional financial media outlets, really what they're talking about 90-something% of the time is they're talking about Bitcoin, they're talking about Dogecoin, and they don't really talk about much of anything else. When in fact, maybe they discuss a little bit of Ethereum, despite the fact that Ethereum is going to be providing a fundamentally unique platform to trigger so-called smart contracts based on real-time data that gets flowed into the blockchain network. And this is going to be, I believe, the approach of the future. So while financial literacy is such a crucial thing for people to understand, so that they understand how to open up a Coinbase Pro account, how to be able to wire some money into there, and to be able to start to understand how to chart out and invest the money, it's hard for people today to find a broad array of helpful financial information to really give them a leg up in terms of that. I would encourage people to read Barron's. I would encourage people, of course, to read Real Clear Markets. I'm sure you've heard of those guys.
Something like that.
And some other meaningful venues beyond just following CNBC. You can hear Jim Cramer talk about Bitcoin all you want, but it's really not going to provide much information. Let's talk about what's happening now and in the future. And it's interesting when you talk about freedom and freedom of currency, where in a DeFi landscape, you're taking away the government, which wants to put their big bulky hands in for regulation. You're removing a lot of the brick and mortar traditional banks because you're going peer to peer. It's direct. It's DeFi. You don't have to go through Wells Fargo or Bank of America. It's financial freedom powered by technology. If you want to know how governments react to freedom, then take a look at how different countries are responding. China, of course, responded by outlawing it. And I was reading an article today about China. It's very difficult. You talk about Tiananmen Square. You're not going to find any articles that are free in China today talking about how Bitcoin is taking off. China is digitizing the yuan. They're getting the app ready. And then when the Winter Olympics come just a few months from now, they're going to provide people on their phones an opportunity to load up digital yuan on their phone and take it out for a spin. And then when they go home, it's going to be on their phone. And then they're going to get hooked on it. And the data underneath the transactions is going to be held by China. They're brilliant. The feds here in Washington are giving it a little bit of lip service, and they're talking about whether or not the United States needs to digitize the dollar. Do you think that that is something that is important and relevant to consider here, or do you think that's a red herring?
The yuan's already digitized. I mean, it's important to point out that in China, very few people use paper money anymore. China's the country that invented paper fiat currency, but rarely do people take out their phones and swipe them for just about everything in China. If you and I were there with yuan, people would look somewhat askance at us. And so in a sense, the dollar is already digitized too if you choose to do that. It's interesting, the U.S. is just not as advanced on this, but I don't think we need to worry about this. And it's so interesting with China in mind, because you talk about this decentralized finance, and it's so important. Ant Group has a 3-1-1 concept in China, where literally a business with no collateral to show can go and get itself registered on Ant in 3 minutes, have its loan approved in 1 minute, and have cash in its account in one. It's something like, but it's 3-1-1. I mean, it's instantaneous.
Right.
And to be clear about this, they loan out tons of money, but the default on the loan rate is much lower because they've got amazing data on their customers. And so China could be so ahead on this financial innovation. It's entrepreneurs, just based on the fact that Ant Group is one of the most innovative financial companies in the world. And so I almost feel like a lot of this is going to take care of itself. Watch what you talk about, educating people about how to do this. Young people, in fact, will educate us about crypto money. I'll just give one example, and it's an old one. And you all may or may not remember Miller's Outpost from the 70s and 80s. It was a big retailer, Blue Jeans. And the CEO was once asked, or the founder of it, how do you pick the stuff on the shelves? And he said, I go to minority communities and watch how they're dressing. They tell me what fashion's going to be in the future. Young kids are already on this stuff. They already own crypto money in the way that we older people do not.
Right.
They are going to figure out ways to make this work. They're going to educate us, is my guess.
Yeah.
We don't need to worry about it. They will be our teachers, just as they taught us how to better use the internet, and they revolutionized it.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because my son Adam taught me and led me to Celsius. And he said, Dad, you can make almost 9% APY. And I'm like, okay, lead me to it. And then, of course, he had to show me how to load the app, which is pretty pathetic, but that's just me being a technological Neanderthal. But, there's so much opportunity in this. And the concept of a new creation of currency is just so fascinating to me. I do believe that it's going to be in the best interest of Washington to at least take a faster, more efficient look at digitizing the dollar. The power and the dominion of the dollar as the preferred choice of currency throughout the world is at risk. Obviously, when you go to the EU, you're converting, to the local economy, and you're going to be using euros. And the dollar, though, is still a major aspect of international currency, and the viability and the strength of the dollar is part of the reason why international sanctions work. So you could argue that it's a matter of relevance to national security, that if, for example, we want to impose some kind of financial sanction on a country, that the dollar remains strong. But if other countries are running circles around us because we're stuck in this cloth currency that's over a century old, there could be some relevancy on that. John, just kind of going into the final chapter here for our discussion today, where do you see Washington coming down on this? What do you believe is going to be the next phase of action or inaction from here in Washington as it relates to cryptocurrency and potential regulation of crypto?
Well, it's hard I can't stress enough that nothing brings out the stupid like money. And it will be so interesting to see what politicians want to do, because there's a belief in Washington that money is wealth, Now, money on its own is meaningless. Money is just an agreement about wealth among producers. And so it's scary. And based on this, there's this view to this day, well, government must control the money because during recessions, government must gun the money supply. Nothing could be more ludicrous than this point of view. Try to gun the money supply in West Baltimore. It would exit as quickly as it arrived. Try to shrink money supply in Palo Alto, California. Markets would make up for that shrinkage in seconds. Money finds production. It doesn't instigate production. And so there's all these views about what government should do. And so if crypto takes over for the dollar, we can't control, we can't fine tune. We can't fight recessions like we used to. It's really all nonsense. Money is what brings producers together. It doesn't instigate. But I will say this. Precisely because cryptocurrencies might achieve this stability that was historically the sole use of money, a way to facilitate the exchange of goods and services, this will be the best thing that ever happened to the dollar. Finally, real decentralized competition from around the world will force the U.S. Treasury to get serious about dollar price stability. If the dollar wants to remain the world's reserve currency, it had better be more trusted than these crypto alternatives. And so here's the opportunity.
I love that point. So in other words, if you apply the crypto space to provide a traditional competitive environment, and if the folks at Treasury, if all the people in Washington smart up to this competitive landscape, what would be an example of tangibly a step that they could do to be able to up their game? Because there's nothing like competition to be able to get the best out of anybody, and perhaps regulators as well. What would be an example of what they could do?
Well, to me, and it opens up such weird reactions from people, but clearly for the longest time, the dollar had a commodity definition. And it did because what is money but a measure? Money's 12 inches. Money's a foot. Right. Money's a minute. It
used to be a shell.
Yeah. No, it's always been some. They've been looking for a constant measure of value for as long as money's existed. And finally, after endless trial and error, they happened on gold. And it wasn't because gold is shiny. It's got unique characteristics that make it very stable. The price of gold today is the same as the forward price. It's enormously stable. So it was used to define money.
Right.
And so this is something that if more and more people, I was transacting with you, you transferred Dogecoin to my account if you want my my car or something.
Sure.
If suddenly this was pushing out the dollar because it was more trusted, well, this would be an excuse for Treasury to say, we can redefine the dollar in ways that would make it the trusted currency of choice.
That's fascinating, and that is a viewpoint that I haven't heard before, and I think it's fascinating. Isn't it really interesting that in the DNA of bureaucrats, they don't look at it as an opportunity to improve; they look at it as an opportunity to regulate, and that is a really, really great point. In my view. It reminds me of something that I saw on social media the other day when they were talking about if DC, tries to pull a China and try to somehow restrict crypto, and then they said, we don't care, we'll just operate it on the moon. They really don't need. It's decentralized. It's DeFi. That's the whole point. So I don't believe that there is a place for government to step back the progress on the widespread adoption of cryptocurrency, and in particular the blockchain technology is with us to stay. I predict that Washington will have a lot of hot air and a lot of debate and a lot of discussion, and they will do nothing, including causing a delay in any kind of meaningful progress on considering whether or not to digitize the dollar. And I think that might have some consequences too. John, another great conversation. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.